everyone. I'm Elizabeth Quibby, Executive Director of the North State Symphony. We're so glad you're joining us for our first virtual concert of 2021. This pre-concert talk with Maestro Scott Seaton has been generously sponsored by Richard and Pat Macias. While we miss sharing live music with you in person, your support has truly been sustaining us through our virtual 20th anniversary season. Whether you've sponsored a concert, become a season member, given a gift of any amount, or shared our music videos with your friends, you are helping us find new ways of keeping classical music in our community. If you'd like to support the symphony, please visit our website, www.northstatesymphony.org. Your gifts and memberships directly support our musicians, staff, and all of our creative projects, like the one you're just about to see. On behalf of everyone at the North State Symphony, thank you for joining us. We hope you enjoy it as much as we enjoyed producing it. And now to Scott.
Good evening, everyone. It's so great to be here talking to you tonight in this next presentation of our virtual concerts for our 20th season. An epic season at that, especially considering everything that's going on. But it's great to be here, great to chat with you all. I want to thank our pre-concert talk sponsors, Richard and Pat Macias. Thank you all so much for allowing us to present all of the concert information to our wonderful audience. And now let's get to it. So this concert is called Conversations. It was originally called Friendship and Love, and it was supposed to debut before, it's supposed to premiere before Valentine's Day. But we are in an ever-changing world, and so the first three concerts we had in our 20th season were pre-recorded in person, meaning we got our ensembles together and we recorded in Chico at the Women's Club, we recorded in Reading at Old City Hall, and in Eureka. But you know, we are in a time of adaptation, and we were not able to even get together in person this time due to various restrictions. So we had to adapt, and we had to adapt very quickly. So we did. This concert, we put a call out to our musicians, and basically we wanted to see what they wanted to do, what we could highlight in terms of having groups, small groups of two, maybe even three sometimes, and to call this concert Conversations, because a lot has to happen to bring an event like this together. And if you had asked me a year ago that we'd be doing a concert like this, I would have been like, there's no way, because it's extraordinarily complex. So the musicians had to first agree on the repertoire, and then they had to make it happen, meaning they had to come to musical decisions, they had to come to technical decisions, the way things are recorded, what angles you're going to have the camera at, how you're going to record the sound. And ultimately, all the tracks are sent to me, and then I put it together in a final audio and visual mixing process, which is another thing that I never thought I would be doing had you asked me a year ago. So yes, they recorded in their respective homes, and in some cases we had musicians who were living together. For instance, if we have a couple, and they were able to record together, which is nice, and a little bit less work on the back end of things in terms of putting it together in terms of editing. So it's great because so much has to be agreed upon. You know, there's a lot of dialogue that has to happen, and disagreements on how things are done here and there. And it's great that we can all open up and listen to what others are saying and adapt and take in opinions and adjust if we need to. So that's what this whole concert is about. It's about basically adapting to the world we're in right now. And it's about people, and it's about humanity, and it's about coming together even if we can't come together. So let's just jump into the music. The first thing you're going to hear on tonight's program is a composer by the name of Anthony Ploeg. Looks like plog, but instead of frog, it's toad. I watched an interview of his Ploeg. And I want to preface my explanations or my little tidbits about the pieces that you're going to hear from the musicians tonight. So that's especially exciting that all of them have agreed to give some comments about what you're going to expect from their pieces. So I'm going to keep most of it to them and just give as much of an overview as I can. But like I said, the first composer is Anthony Ploeg, and you're going to hear two of our trumpet players, Ian Cochran, our principal trumpet, and Ayako Nakamura. And they're going to come together and play these contra duets for trumpets by Anthony Ploeg. And he was a composer-conductor who began playing trumpet at the age of 10. He composed chamber music, symphonic music, and operas. And opera is easily the most interesting thing that we're going to talk about when it comes to his compositions. He has written children's operas, including How the Trumpet Got Its Toot, which is really humorous and fun, all the way to more serious subjects, including one that is the story of a drone operator suffering from a nervous breakdown. So as you can see, a much more serious subject. If that doesn't give you an inkling about the incredible power of music to tell a story, he also has an oratorio about environmental battles in the United States, as well as a cantata that uses stories of women who have recovered from sex trafficking, prostitution, and drug abuse. So he has covered the whole gamut of musical subjects in his works. But this evening, we're going to experience his world as both a professional trumpet player, as someone who has performed in over 30 countries and who was playing in the Los Angeles Philharmonic by the age of 19. It's that spirit and determination that we hear in this evening's music, in the contra duets for trumpet. I'm going to play you an excerpt. So in the following excerpt from the first movement, the fanfare, I really enjoy his use of these tight, crunchy harmonies. It makes me think of the way Igor Stravinsky loved to score for brass, particularly in his early ballet, Petrushka, which was at the dawn of the 20th century. And these dissonants, I talk about the term crunchy, I'm talking about dissonance as opposed to consonants. And in this excerpt, there's a parallel to disagreement, if we're talking, that finds resolution with, in music, these pure intervals, these fourths, these fifths or octaves. But listen to this, because you'll hear a lot of that dissonance going to these beautiful open intervals. And here is the excerpt by Anthony Ploeg. Just let me find that for you. Here we go. Wonderful playing, and you are in for a treat with the other movements as well. Just let me move this real quick. It's a lot different than being in a concert hall tonight. So that's the Ploeg. The next piece you're going to hear is by Heitor Villa-Lobos, and we're going on to Brazil now. Villa-Lobos is a name that most of us know. He was a very, very prolific composer, and he totaled more than 2,000 works by his passing in 1969. Villa-Lobos is known for fusing the Western classical world with Brazilian folk music. And as a youngster, the clarinet and cello, he took lessons from his father, but just a few years later, he could be found teaching himself guitar and playing on the streets of Rio de Janeiro. Now, Villa-Lobos was to Brazil what Aaron Copland is to America, in that he wanted to capture the sounds of the nation. And he did extensive traveling to experience as much of the folk music traditions as possible. So this piece on the program, Jet Whistle, was actually composed when he was in New York in 1950. and was named for a technique that the flutist uses in the third movement. Tonight you're going to hear the second and third movements. With the first movement is a treat for our North State Symphony members, which if you're not a member yet, please consider joining so you can get all these extra little bonus pieces that we send to you. But it was named for this technique in the third movement, which combines quick moves of the fingers up and down the flute with this forceful blowing directly into the instrument. And when you do both of these things together, it's the resulting whistle sounds that sound like a jet taking off. So in the excerpt that I'm going to play for you, it's from the second movement, so it's a much slower, expansive movement. And you're going to hear a beautiful, flowing, earthly, melodic line. And you should pay special attention to the descending cello line. This chromatic, just taking us all the way down. And it's weaving down this chromatic scale with this beautiful Debussy-esque, French-like linear melody soaring above it. So here we go. Here's an excerpt from the second movement of the Villalobos. So that, of course, is Ruth Polcari and Anthony Polcari, and of course you see them playing together, so they are related. They are mother and son, wonderful musicians, such valuable assets to the symphony, and it's a real you're in for a real treat with the Villalobos. So next we have a piece by a composer by the name of Harold Owen. It's a clarinet quartet. And he's a very prolific composer. This piece is actually for 4 clarinets and is performed by a Reading native, Bruce Belton. Now it's a quartet, so the other clarinets are Bruce Belton, and, well, Bruce Belton. Now this is a really neat work that makes me think of a soundtrack to some futuristic cartoon from the 80s or the 90s, maybe even the Jetsons, if anyone knows some of that music. But Owen is a professor emeritus of composition at the University of Oregon in Eugene. And I think you'll find this work very light, very accessible, and you hear a composer that's at ease when it comes to counterpoint or the way lines act, the way he's creating these textural nuances in the piece. So here's Harold Owen's chamber music for 4 clarinets. Here's a little taste of it. Wonderful. And then the next piece, we're doing 2 pieces featuring Bruce Belton this evening because they're relatively short. But Bruce then continues with an exploration of minimalism, which is a technique used by a lot of 20th century composers that uses small musical fragments and the idea of repetition and slow harmonic change. But he uses minimalism with a work by Mark Mellitz. And the name of this work is called Extrasensory Perception. And he'll be doing the first movement, which is called Roasting Petunia. So American Mark Mellett is one of the most performed contemporary composers in the world, with this unique style that is a mixture of driving rhythms, of lyricism, and of colorful orchestrations. If you enjoy the works of other minimalists like John Adams or Steve Reich, you'll enjoy this Mellett piece very much. And many of you might know the works of Mason Bates, which we've performed at the North State Symphony, and I hope to do again soon. But he's another composer that you can derive some parallels to in the music of Mark Mellett's. So let's listen to Bruce again, and this time he's multiplied by 8. There are going to be 8 Bruces on the screen, and here's the Mellett's excerpt for you. It's such a fun piece. I can't wait to show it to you. And Bruce is extraordinary because he's not just a performer, but he's been doing a lot of this sound and video editing for quite some time now. And as you can see by how well his videos are done, he does it all in his home, and you can look forward to a brief explanation during the concert of how he actually does it all. So after the Mellett's piece, the program then takes a turn to an opera of the mid-1800s, performed by our principal tubist, Nathan Bastuschek, and his violist wife, Julia Bastuschek. And this opera that their excerpts are coming from, it's called Martha. And it's a romantic comic opera by Friedrich von Flotow. And there's no lack of melody. So if you love melody, this is the piece for you. And during this, you'll enjoy a unique instrumental pairing on a bizarre opera that traverses through a convoluted story of a bored, high-class woman who accidentally finds herself as a servant to a young farmer. And then, of course, the farmer falls in love with her. Then the girl gets weary of that and runs away. And then he finds her, and then says he's a madman and has him detained. And then he's later freed from some old relic of a ring that a queen recognizes. And then a courtship ensues with the girl and a new nobleman. And then somehow at the end, everyone is happy, to the confusion of the 20th century audience, or the 21st century audience, and, well, me. Nonetheless, you'll enjoy some very warm, cozy chamber music by our wonderful NSS musicians. And here's a little taste of that. Let me find that for you. So delightful little chamber music from Nathan and Julia. And from the Flotow, we're going to go to a composer by the name of Daniel Levitan. This piece is called Variations on a Ghanaian Theme, and it features our percussionists, Eric Whitmer, who's a section percussionist, Brian Simpson, our principal timpanist, and Matthew Timon, who is our principal percussionist. And this piece is a work written in 1981 by Daniel Levitan, who has extensive works for percussion ensemble. And this work takes a theme derived from Ghanaian music and is a percussion party for 6 minutes following that. So a good deal of music on the coast of Africa is associated with social functions and relies on complex polyrhythmic patterns. And polyrhythmic, I mean one rhythmic layer, and then you stack another one on top and another one on top. That's what polyrhythmic implies. So it stacks these patterns with drums and dance, and these two things are often inseparable. The instruments of the area are unique and cousins of which you would typically find in Western music. So here is a sample of what you can expect from our three wonderful percussionists. So as you can see, it's going to be a lot of fun. Yeah, feel free to get up and dance if you really feel like it. And that wonderful collaboration from far corners of the United States, and they'll tell you all about that, will lead us into our final piece for this wonderful conversations program. And to a Russian composer, Nikolai Kapustin. He was a Soviet and Russian composer and a pianist who was born in 1937 and died just last year. His highly charged childhood included his father fighting in World War II, and him and his mother and his grandmother relocating for safety. But his musical ability thrived, and he composed his first piano sonata at just 13 years old. So there's a little bit of the Mozart effect in that. It was in 1945 that this young Nikolai discovered jazz and dived into his study of the art form. He graduated later on from the Moscow Conservatory and then made a living as a jazz pianist and a composer, even playing in a big band in the 1950s. Now, he mainly composed music that was a fusion of classical and Western tradition with improvisational jazz. But he maintains that he wasn't a jazz musician, and Anthony Polcari will tell you a little bit about this. He maintains that he wasn't a jazz musician because he didn't improvise. And similarly, that the piece you're going to hear tonight, which is the duo for alto saxophone and cello, that the piece you're going to hear isn't necessarily jazz because the performers don't improvise. Now, I'm not here to debate what is and isn't jazz, but you know, going through this piece was interesting. I had a lot of inner turmoil. You know, I grew up playing jazz, and I'm a saxophonist. And by the way, surprise, I'm the other performer on this piece along with Anthony. We had such a great time putting this together. But going through it, you know, it's very, very interesting. So I'm just going to point out some of the fun things about it. You know, it starts out with the cello, and it goes through some really interesting, I'm going to use the word crunchy again, crunchy, punchy chords. And I feel like the debate Anthony and I had was that it feels like it needs to be swung, that it needs to feel jazzy and fast. But you know, he writes it at quarter note equals 184. That's 184 beats a minute, which is really fast. And if you play a piece with a lot of eighth notes in the jazz tradition that fast, if you intentionally don't swing it, what I found is that eventually it's going to feel like it's swinging anyway. But we'll talk about that in a second. But it starts out with another really interesting jazzy thing, the tritone, the interval of a tritone, which is... My microphone is very close. I'm sorry. But it starts out with the tritone, and well, here's the first line the saxophone plays. Now, if you eliminate the tritone, or this non-chord tone, the part of the melodic line that just stabs its way through it, if you replace it with something much more conventional and Western, it changes the piece completely, and it loses that jazz element. But he plays it like this. Now, the other interesting thing about the way he writes is that the way he groups the notes, it's also very jazzy. So even though he doesn't say to swing the eighth notes, I feel like in a future performance of the piece, we're just going to end up doing that. So for example, But if you swing it, the character changes completely. Watch this. So a little bit different. Now, the other thing, there's a section in this that I can't help but to think of Charlie Parker. I grew up playing all of his standards. I had the Charlie Parker Omnibook, but there's a section where the cello goes into this pizzicato section, much like a bassist in a jazz trio, and the saxophone on top is playing this line. And I just imagine this breathy, gritty saxophone tone with this line that just wants to lay back as far as it will go. So imagine a pizzicato bass underneath this. Anyway, I've flubbed some stuff, but you get the point. It feels like that Parker-esque, just slow weaving in and out of the chords. It's really, really neat. And then the final thing that has me not convinced that isn't really jazz is just the huge amount of bluesy notes and pentatonic sounds that this has. So here's the very ending of the piece, and you can decide for yourself. And we have a concert in 4 minutes, so I'm going to try to wrap this up as quickly as I can. But here's the final part, and it just sounds like jazz, even though he says it doesn't have improvisation, so it can't be jazz. So it's just so hard not to swing that, not to make it just truly jazz-like, but that's what he says. So that's Nikolai Kapustin's duo for alto saxophone and cello. So yeah, we have a really fun concert coming up on YouTube, and I'm really happy that we're again partnering with our public access stations, SCA TV, BCAC TV, Access Humboldt, and they're presenting our wonderful musicians all across Northern California. So take a couple minutes now, go grab a drink, sit back on your couch, and invite the North State Symphony into your living room. I can't wait to see you all in person, hopefully sometime soon. But until then, thank you so much for connecting with us in this virtual environment. And please stay safe, happy, and healthy, and I'll see you soon. Thanks.